everybody. I'm Michael from One Sky, and this video is going to take a look at the full moon lunar eclipse on July 16th, 2019. This is just following a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse that happened on July 3rd, 2019. So a lot of dynamic energy is being stirred up at this time. I want to look at the chart of this full moon, but first I want to notice, as you may have already done, that this is astronomically accurate zodiac. This is an astronomically accurate form of astrology, and so the size of the constellations varies from constellation to constellation. So again, this is a little bit different from mainstream astrology, and I bring it up at the start of every video because most people are used to seeing a zodiac wheel that looks a little bit different than this one. So the sun is here at the last degree of Gemini, right on the Gemini-Cancer cusp. And as the sun moves from Gemini to Cancer, there's going to be a shift from the head to the heart. Gemini is a very intellectual, very curious, very information and communication oriented group of stars. But Cancer, by comparison, is very nurturing, very caring, very motherly, very familial. There's a protective influence to Cancer, where Gemini is a little bit aloof, sort of intellectual by comparison. And with the sun there, the moon will be reflecting its light from Sagittarius, where it is conjoined to Pluto, the south node, and Saturn. Now the sun is technically making conjunctions to Mercury, the north node, and Venus. So what we have here is a bit of a tension, to say the least, between these stelliums here in Gemini and Cancer around the personal planets, the inner planets, representing more the conscious mind and our lived experience on a day-to-day basis. And over here we have, with the exception of the moon, which certainly functions as a personal planet, we have Pluto, which is reflective of the unconscious, deep, transcendental, primordial flows of consciousness. Not so much our everyday lived and felt experience, but the undercurrent, the sort of undertow beneath it. We have Saturn, too, representing a little bit of a transpersonal influence, in that it has to do with structures, the way we organize ourselves, authority, restriction, discipline, timing, patience. These are the themes of Saturn. And what we see is a fundamental opposition, the possibility for tension, even conflict between our conscious minds and our unconscious minds. At this time, the moon, representing our feelings, our emotions, our inner world, is here in the deep territory with the unconscious and transpersonal influences. And the other personal planet, which is Mars, while it's not making any oppositions to this stellium here in Sagittarius, it is in the same region as the rest of the personal planets. So we do have a sort of imbalance, a theme of dynamic tension between maybe our conscious minds and our unconscious minds. With the sun here on the north node, we've had the experience for the last 2 weeks of being in a cycle where we're developing in new ways, looking forward. And if you remember, that new moon was sextile to Uranus, bringing into the frame, into the energy of the new moon, the qualities of innovation, the qualities of novelty that Uranus represents and reflects. And the North Node is looking forward. So overall, we have an energy of change, of growth, of looking forward, of this is like the things that I wanted to generate for myself were coming pretty easily in as much as I was able to implement new patterns, make some significant changes in the past 2 weeks to my habits, my routines, my own lifestyle. And now, with the moon come around to make opposition to the sun, we not only have the dynamic tension of the two luminaries in opposite degrees of the sky, but we do have the sun making a pretty close opposition to Pluto, and the moon making a pretty close conjunction. 2 degrees and 11 minutes to be precise. And that's close enough to really give it a pronounced and intensified effect. With Pluto comes a certain fixation, a certain intensity, a certain depth, a certain obsessive quality. But with Pluto comes change, transformation. Anything Pluto touches, it's going to transform. So when the moon comes around to conjoin to the South Node and to Pluto, our old habits, our old patterns have a chance to finally die, to let the ember of those fires burn out, and let the new fires that have been lit since the full moon really blaze. Some other interesting aspects that are happening include Uranus, which figured into the new moon, and it's making squares to Mercury and to Mars in Cancer. Now, Mercury and Mars in Cancer are also making trines to Chiron in Pisces. So our energies at this time, especially around matters of the heart and of nurturing, of family, of really caring for ourselves and others, are likely to be aligned in a healing way, although there may be some resistance to new patterns expressed by these square relationships up to Uranus. So right now, one piece of advice that I can offer looking at this chart is to say, set the intention to solidify any new habits, patterns, ideas, anything that seems like it might be really beneficial, worth holding on to, really worth keeping, that's arisen out of the last week, 2 weeks, and set the intention to really cultivate that. There may be some resistance to really that setting in, and with all of this conscious mind represented by the personal planet, and all of this unconscious mind represented by Pluto and the transpersonal influence of Saturn, I could see there being some tensions that might be exacerbating these squares up to Uranus and the integration of new patterns, new habits. Another thing that I see is that Venus and the North Node are pretty closely conjunct. So this may be a time in Gemini to develop new relationships. This may be a time to look forward and think about the way that we relate to people, what we appreciate about people, our receptive qualities. Are we listening to people? And just kind of take note, take a status check on our communication and relationships, setting any intentions that we might have about or around how we'd like to communicate better in the future. And that Venus is also making a trine up to Neptune here. Neptune in late Aquarius is well placed, and that Neptune is going to give this Venus North Node conjunction an energy of inspiration, an energy of maybe even idealism, possibly the kind of visionary influence that will allow us to really cultivate the way that we're communicating, listening, appreciating others, being appreciated by others. A chance to really take a look at that and see, how do I want to come across to people? How do I arrange myself when people are talking? Am I listening? Am I waiting for my turn to speak? Am I responding out of helpful intention? Am I responding out of ego? Taking account of these things at this time is going to be very assisted, and it's an energy that allows us to make plans, to better ourselves, to make plans to better ourselves in the future that are going to be, again, assisted as if we were in a boat and the wind was at our backs. And lastly, with this Venus North Node making aspects up to Neptune in Aquarius, we do have it also, Venus North Node also making an opposition to Saturn. And Saturn is, of course, conjoined to the South Node. So at this time, it's a great time to take a look at any restrictions in relationship, any issues around control, any fears that are happening with Saturn in Sagittarius. This can be philosophical. With Venus in Gemini, it's a great time to think, to consider our relationships. How are we holding ourselves back? How have we historically been kept from our full potential by our fears, our restrictions, our need to control, power play dynamics around authority and relationship? And these are great questions to ask at this time. So, considering that the new moon was a full solar eclipse, the full moon, with the moon here conjunct to Pluto, is really about disruption of patterns. Anything that's come into play, it's going to have to displace something. And the energy of this moon is definitely an energy of displacing, of changing the expression of the fundamental energies of ourself as reflected by the moon here. Again, Pluto is the transformer. It never lets anything stay the same. So in our coming around here, we do see that the moon has made its way past Saturn, conjoined to Saturn, looking at issues of darkness, fear, control, abandonment, all these things. And then with the South Node, really bringing into that frame a quality of looking to the past, to history, in retrospection, then coming around to conjoin up to Pluto, just taking off in the trajectory of change. What that trajectory will be different for everybody based on the new patterns that have been established, especially in the last 2 weeks. But what it is a trajectory of letting go of the old, letting go of the past, letting go of any darkness that may have held us back from expressing any truths or new emergences, newly emerged patterns in the last couple weeks. So, to finish up, I want to say that every lunar cycle starts with the new moon, where the seed is planted, and goes through a waxing phase until it reaches fullness. And in that waxing phase, we're often integrating, building, working to establish, we're cultivating plans, things that have just sprung up and that are kind of tender, like little shoots, and we're growing them into robust plants. And the moon, the full moon, is like the fruiting of the plant, like the fruition, where we reap the harvest. And then after that point, there's a waning phase where we return back to the next new moon. And by return, I mean it's a time when the energies that are most supported are energies of contemplation, consideration, inward introspection, and integrating what we've learned from our experience in the waxing phase by meditation, contemplation, consideration. So now, after this full moon on July 16th, we're entering into the waning phase of this lunar cycle. So I want to invite you to notice what has been disrupted, what has been established, what has changed, what has come up for review in the last couple weeks. In the next couple weeks, the weeks following July 16th, it's a great time to consider, to build towards that next new moon, the next phase of our plan. It's a moon that's going to take place in the constellation of Cancer. So the energies here are shifting towards energies of the heart, energies of family, energies of nurturing, caring for, providing for, energies of emotional security. So from here, from this full moon in Sagittarius, conjoined to Pluto, Saturn, the South Node, the next 2 weeks are going to be a wonderful time to connect more and more deeply with this energy of the heart as the sun transitions into Cancer, and to continue to let go of any patterns that may be of the past, that may be shedding skin, maybe not needed anymore, and to continue to set that intention to build and to nurture any new patterns, especially around new ways of considering ourselves, new ways of holding ourselves, new ways of maybe respecting ourselves. And that about brings us to a close. There's not a lot happening with the fixed stars this week. Not a lot to mention, except this is a time when there's going to be a lot of dynamic tension. This is going to be a really activated full moon where we have an eclipse. We have all of the inner planets, except the moon, in a stellium, making oppositions to some of the darkest parts of our psyche. So we really may benefit at this time from challenging ourselves to accept and integrate those parts, while at the same time challenging ourselves to let go of any behaviors that arise out of those unresolved parts of our psyche that may be holding us back from our highest good, our highest potential, from our highest accomplishments and self-expression. All right, everybody. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon for another video. Goodbye.